The summer evening of Mia Collins' 12th birthday party in 1999 was filled with the kind of warmth and happiness only childhood can bring. The sun was beginning to set, casting long golden rays across the quiet suburban streets where families gathered to celebrate, and the air was thick with the smell of freshly cut grass mixed with the sweet scent of birthday cake. Mia's laughter echoed through the backyard as she ran with her friends, her face alight with pure joy, her hands clutching colorful party favors, and for a moment, it felt like the whole world was holding its breath in a perfect moment of innocence and delight. But as the evening wore on and the party began to wind down, the joyful noise gave way to a creeping silence that settled uneasily over the group. And it was then that Mia disappeared without a trace. One moment, she was there, surrounded by friends and family, and the next, she was gone, swallowed by the darkening shadows of the neighborhood she had always called home. I remember the panic that erupted as we called her name, our voices cracking with fear and disbelief, searching every corner of the house, the yard, and the streets beyond. But no matter how hard we looked, no sign of Mia emerged, and the warm summer night was replaced by an oppressive quiet that pressed in on our hearts. The police arrived swiftly, their flashing lights illuminating the streets as officers combed the area, questioned neighbors, and scoured the surrounding woods with flashlights cutting through the darkness. But their search yielded nothing. No footprints, no clues, no whisper of what had become of the little girl who had vanished from a simple birthday celebration. The community, once tightly knit and carefree, was left fractured and fearful. Whispers of suspicion and dread spreading through the streets like wildfire as families locked their doors tighter and watched each other with wary eyes, trying to make sense of a tragedy that had shattered the illusion of safety. Nights stretched into weeks filled with sleepless vigil and desperate hope, the image of Mia's smiling face haunting every quiet moment, while the unanswered questions gnawed at the edges of our sanity, and the relentless ache of loss became a constant companion. As the search dragged on with no new leads, the birthday party transformed in our memories from a day of joy to a haunting reminder of everything lost. The laughter now, a ghostly echo, the games forever frozen in time, and the place where Mia had last been seen, a painful symbol of the mystery that consumed us. And though the police and community did everything they could, the truth remained hidden beneath layers of silence, leaving us to live with the unbearable uncertainty, clinging to the fragile hope that one day Mia would be found, and the darkness that had fallen over our lives would finally lift, revealing answers long overdue. The days and weeks after Mia vanished shattered the fragile fabric of our family's life, leaving behind a raw and aching void that nothing seemed able to fill. And as the initial shock wore off, the strain began to show in every quiet glance and unspoken word between Jenna and Mark Collins, my parents, who once seemed so strong and united, but now moved through the house like strangers weighed down by grief that settled heavily between them. Their marriage, once a source of comfort and stability, was now fractured by the unbearable loss of Mia. The silence growing louder than any argument, as each of them retreated into their own worlds of pain and regret, unable to find solace in one another's company. The small town we called home too changed in subtle but profound ways, the close-knit community replaced by an atmosphere thick with fear and suspicion. Neighbors, who once shared smiles and casual greetings, now exchanged guarded looks, whispers swirling about what had happened that terrible night, and who might be responsible, as though mistrust could somehow protect them from the unknown terror lurking just beneath the surface. Jenna, overwhelmed by a desperate need to find Mia, became consumed with the search. Her days and nights blurring into a relentless quest for answers that seemed to drift further away with every passing hour, while the police, despite their best efforts, found themselves battling a cold case that grew colder still, their leads drying up and their hope waning. I watched helplessly as the woman I had always looked up to was transformed by grief into someone unrecognizable, her face etched with lines of exhaustion and sorrow, her eyes haunted by a relentless storm of unanswered questions and the crushing weight of what-ifs that never left her mind. Mark, meanwhile, became quieter, retreating further into himself, his once bright gaze dimmed by guilt and the pain of feeling powerless to protect his family, their home filled with the kind of silence that presses down on your chest and makes every breath a struggle. The rift between them seemed impossible to bridge, with neither knowing how to reach the other or how to carry the unbearable loss without fracturing under its weight. And in that broken space, I felt the absence of Mia most keenly, the sister who had vanished into thin air, leaving behind a family forever changed. The town's fear and suspicion fed on itself, turning neighbors into strangers and friends into wary observers, as the community struggled to comprehend a darkness that had touched us all, yet left no clear answers, and the shadow of Mia's disappearance stretched long over every corner, coloring memories and conversations with a sadness that refused to fade. Through it all, Jenna clung fiercely to the hope that one day Mia would be found, her determination a flickering flame in the gathering dusk of despair, while the world around us held its breath, waiting for a sign, a breakthrough, or a miracle that might begin to heal the fractures left in the wake of that night. 10 years slipped by like shadows at dusk, quiet and unrelenting, stretching out in a slow, heavy silence that swallowed every hope and whispered the cruel truth that Mia was still gone, leaving Jenna to carry the unbearable weight of absence in the very walls of their home where time seemed to stand still. I watched as she kept Mia's room exactly as it had been, the pale lavender walls untouched, the little bed neatly made with the quilt Mia had loved, and the shelves lined with stuffed animals gathering dust but never moved. As if by preserving this fragile sanctuary, Jenna could somehow hold her daughter close, despite the years that had slipped through their fingers like grains of sand. Every day, Jenna revisited the last places Mia had been seen, wandering the empty streets of our neighborhood, tracing the paths of that fateful night over and over, as if the act of remembering might unravel the mystery that had swallowed her daughter whole and breathe life back into the cold, dark corners where hope dared not tread. The police investigation, once active and urgent, slowed to a crawl, the files thick with unanswered questions and faded leads, and while officers rotated in and out of the case, no fresh clues surfaced to break through the fog of uncertainty that had settled over the town. The community, too, tried to piece together a semblance of normalcy, burying their fear beneath polite smiles and cautious greetings. But beneath the surface, the memory of Mia's disappearance lingered like a shadow that stretched long and dark across every holiday, every gathering, every quiet moment when the absence of a child was felt like a silent scream. Jenna's hope, though battered and bruised by the relentless passage of time, never truly faded. It lived in the quiet moments when she touched Mia's old sweater, in the whispered prayers before sleep, and in the fierce determination that refused to let go despite the years of silence. I saw the toll it took on her, the sleepless nights haunted by dreams, and the constant ache in her heart, but also the strength that flickered beneath the grief, a stubborn flame that refused to be extinguished by the darkness that surrounded us all. Friends drifted away, believing the worst or simply unable to bear the weight of a loss they could neither fix nor understand. And the neighborhood, that had once been alive with laughter and community, grew quieter, shadows filling the spaces where joy once lived. Yet Jenna kept fighting, reaching out to cold case units, attending support groups, and never missing a chance to speak Mia's name aloud, determined to keep her daughter's memory alive, even when it seemed like the world had forgotten. In the stillness of those years, I realized that hope is not a blazing fire, but a quiet ember, glowing faintly beneath the ashes of despair, and that sometimes the hardest battles are the ones fought in silence, holding on to the fragile belief that, one day, the truth will break through the quiet and bring light to the shadows that have claimed us for so long. During renovations at the old house where Abby Reynolds, Mia's best friend, had once lived, workers uncovered something. None of us expected: a hidden crawlspace concealed beneath the worn, creaking floorboards. A cramped, shadowed chamber, forgotten by time and tucked away like a secret waiting to be uncovered. The moment Jenna heard the news, a spark of cautious hope ignited in her weary heart, as though this dark, hidden space might finally hold the answers we had been searching for all these years, the key to unraveling the silence that had swallowed Mia without a trace. I watched her as she stood before the house, her fingers trembling as she touched the weathered wooden floor, imagining the countless footsteps and laughter that had once filled the rooms above, now muted by the weight of mystery and sorrow. The crawl space itself was a narrow, suffocating cavity, its low ceiling forcing anyone who entered to crouch in the gloom. Dust motes, swirling in the slanting beams of sunlight that peeked through cracks in the floorboards, and the air hung heavy with the musty scent of forgotten years and secrets long buried. As Jenna carefully descended into that tight, shadowed space, her breath shallow and heart pounding, she felt the weight of a decade of unanswered questions pressing down on her, the silent walls seeming to hold the echoes of something lost and waiting to be found. Inside, the crawl space revealed remnants of a hidden life, scattered fragments of toys, a torn piece of fabric that might have belonged to Mia, and dust-covered trinkets that whispered of a child's presence concealed from the world. Each small discovery stirred a mix of dread and hope, the fragile possibility that this dark place might finally shed light on the night that had haunted us all for so long. Jenna's eyes searched every corner, her fingers brushing over a faded photograph, partially obscured by decades of dirt, her voice barely a whisper as she called Mia's name into the hollow silence, as if the very act might coax her daughter back from the shadows. Outside, the neighborhood held its breath, the quiet hum of renovation work, mingling with the heavy stillness that had settled over the house since that terrible night, as if the walls themselves waited anxiously for the secrets hidden beneath to finally be brought to light. The discovery of the crawl space shifted the fragile balance of hope and despair, igniting a new determination within Jenna that no darkness could extinguish, a fierce promise to unearth the truth no matter how deep it was buried. And as the days stretched into nights filled with anticipation and dread, I realized that sometimes the most profound answers lie hidden in the darkest places, waiting for the brave and the desperate to find them, and that this cramped, forgotten crawl space might hold the key to finally unlocking the mystery that had gripped us all in its silent, unyielding grip. Inside the cramped, shadowed crawl space beneath the old house, I found myself holding my breath, every sound amplified in the tight space as dust danced in the shafts of weak sunlight filtering through the floorboards above. And then, tucked away in a corner beneath years of forgotten clutter, my fingers brushed against something cold and solid, a small, locked box coated in a thick layer of grime and time. its presence like a whispered promise that the answers I'd been desperate for might finally be within reach. My heart pounded as I carefully pried it open, the creak of rusted hinges echoing in the silence like a fragile sigh. And inside lay a torn photograph of Mia, her face smiling back at me from the faded paper, full of life and innocence frozen in a moment long past, alongside a folded note written in shaky, childish handwriting that made my blood run cold. Unfolding the note with trembling hands, I read words that spoke of fear and secrets too heavy for a child to carry. Cryptic phrases hinting at danger lurking close to home, as if Mia had left behind a silent cry for help no one had heard until now. And I was left clutching the fragile paper, its edges worn and stained, feeling the weight of its meaning settle over me like a shadow. The message was haunting in its simplicity, yet devastating. In what it implied, there were things about that night, about that house, that had been hidden, carefully buried beneath layers of silence and denial. And suddenly, the cold case that had haunted me for years felt alive again, charged with a new urgency and hope that refused to be extinguished. I could almost hear Mia's voice in the quiet, a whisper urging me onward, compelling me to dig deeper into the darkness and unravel the secrets that had kept her from coming home. The photograph, torn but unmistakably hers, was a painful reminder of what had been stolen from us, a childhood cut short and a family left shattered and searching, but now a beacon of connection across the years that bound me to her, even in her absence. As I sat there in that cramped crawlspace, surrounded by shadows and memories, I knew this discovery was more than just an artifact. It was a lifeline, a thread I could follow through the maze of lies and forgotten truths that had long guarded the answer to Mia's disappearance. My mind raced with questions: who had written the note? What secrets did it conceal? And could these fragile words unlock the truth that had eluded us for so long? And though fear trembled at the edges of my hope, the fierce determination within me flared brighter, burning away the darkness with the promise that Mia's story was not finished, that the crawl space beneath that house held not just shadows, but the key to finally bringing her home. Detective Ryan Hayes arrived in our town like a fresh breeze, carrying the promise of change, a young man with sharp eyes and an unwavering determination that stirred a cautious hope deep within me. And from the moment he introduced himself, I sensed he was different from the officers who had come before, someone who would listen, who would see the case not as cold and closed, but as a story still waiting to be told. Together, we began revisiting the past, stepping gingerly into the shadows of that summer night when Mia disappeared. As we sought out old witnesses, neighbors who had once stood watching the party with festive smiles, now spoke in hushed tones, their faces lined with the passage of years and memories they seemed reluctant to share. Childhood friends who had played and laughed alongside Mia at the party sat across from us, their eyes flickering with unease as they recounted fragments of conversations, fleeting glances, and details long buried beneath layers of silence, as if the weight of what had happened was too heavy to carry but impossible to ignore. Ryan's calm persistence unlocked stories that had been locked away, secrets whispered behind closed doors and glances stolen in the quiet moments between adults and children alike, and I felt the threads of the mystery begin to unravel slowly, exposing fractures I hadn't dared to imagine. With each interview, the web of the past grew more tangled and complex, revealing a community once united now fractured by fear, suspicion, and the burden of unspoken truths. where neighbors who had seemed friendly now carried the subtle distance of concealed guilt or painful remembrance, I saw in Ryan's eyes the same fierce resolve that burned inside me, the need to dig beneath the surface and confront the darkness that had swallowed my daughter and the innocence of that night. And though the path was painful and strewn with shattered memories, we pressed on, knowing that only by facing the past could we hope to find the truth. Some witnesses hesitated, their voices trembling as they recalled odd figures lurking near the party, or strange noises that had been dismissed at the time, while others revealed fractures within families and friendships, tensions simmering beneath the surface that now seemed all too significant. The air grew thick with emotion during these interviews: regret, fear, sorrow, and, occasionally, relief, as secrets, long hidden, were finally brought into the light, and I could not help but wonder how much of what had been lost might have been saved had we known then what we understood now. The detective and I worked tirelessly, piecing together fragments of memories like a shattered mirror, hoping to catch a glimpse of the reality that had remained just beyond reach for so long. And though the wounds reopened were raw and painful, the possibility of uncovering the truth gave me strength to endure. In those moments, I realized that the past is never truly buried, and the ghosts of that night still walked among us, waiting for someone brave enough to listen and courageous enough to follow the trail to its end. And with Ryan by my side, I dared to believe that the silence would finally be broken and Mia's story told at last. The arrival of the stranger to our quiet neighborhood felt like a ripple disturbing the still surface of a long-settled pond, and from the moment Jenna first spotted him lingering near the party house, a chill settled deep in her bones that no amount of reassurances could shake. He was a man of few words, his face obscured beneath a worn baseball cap, and though he kept to himself, whispers began to swirl among neighbors who recalled seeing him on that fateful night when Mia vanished, their eyes narrowing with suspicion and fear as old wounds reopened. Jenna's anxiety, already a tight knot of restless worry, tightened further as she replayed every memory, every fragment of that evening, now haunted by the possibility that this stranger held pieces of a puzzle long thought lost. I watched her pace the worn wooden floors of our living room, her hands trembling as she clutched at a faded photo of Mia, the fear etched across her face, a mirror of the helplessness she felt. And yet beneath the fear burned a fierce determination to confront this new presence and wrest from him whatever secrets he might be hiding. The community was divided. Some neighbors approached the stranger cautiously, seeking answers, or at least the truth of why he had come back, while others whispered in tight circles, wary of stirring up old fears and wary of the danger that knowledge might bring. Rumors spread like wildfire, some saying he was connected to those who had been present at the party, others speculating darker possibilities that filled Jenna's nights with restless dreams and a gnawing dread. Each time the stranger appeared near the party house, Jenna felt the past closing in around her, a suffocating fog of uncertainty that threatened to consume the fragile hope she had nurtured all these years. She began keeping a closer watch, driving past the house in the fading light, her pulse racing as she searched for any sign, any movement that might explain his presence and what he knew about Mia's disappearance. Sometimes she caught only a glimpse, a shadow slipping behind a curtain, the faint echo of footsteps on cracked pavement, and each time her heart hammered with a mix of fear and resolve. The stranger's silence was maddening, as if he were guarding a secret too heavy to share, and Jenna's mind filled with questions that had no answers. The weight of his inscrutable presence threatening to pull her back into the darkest corners of grief and suspicion. Yet, despite the fear that gripped her, she knew she could not turn away. For this man represented the fragile thread of hope that the truth might finally emerge, that Mia's story was not finished, and that justice, long denied, might still be within reach. As the days passed and the stranger's shadow loomed larger over our lives, Jenna's anxiety became a fierce fire, driving her forward, through the uncertainty and fear, toward the answers she was desperate to find, unwilling to rest until the silence was broken and the secrets buried beneath years of pain were finally brought to light. As Ryan and I delved deeper into the crawlspace beneath that old house and began peeling back the layers of its history, I felt as if we were unraveling a tangled web spun long ago, one woven with whispered conversations and secret meetings that had gone unnoticed for years. And the more we uncovered, the clearer it became that the birthday party where Mia vanished was far more complicated than anyone had ever admitted. Fragments of overheard arguments and hushed voices echoed through time, hinting at fears and threats buried just beneath the surface of that seemingly innocent celebration, as if the night held shadows darker than we had imagined, and the people we once trusted may have been guarding secrets that stretched beyond the walls of that quiet neighborhood. Every detail we uncovered a hastily cancelled meeting, a nervous glance exchanged between adults who were never quite honest, and the sudden disappearance of a key witness all painted a picture of tension and danger lurking beneath the laughter and games, a hidden undercurrent of fear and betrayal that suggested Mia's disappearance was not a random tragedy, but the result of something far more sinister. I found myself haunted by the idea that in the midst of the balloons and birthday songs, dark forces had been at work, weaving a story of silence and complicity that had trapped my daughter and left us grasping for answers in the shadows. Ryan, with his steady calm and sharp mind, pieced together clues that pointed toward a network of secrecy involving families and neighbors whose pasts were entwined in ways no one had dared speak aloud. And the realization that the community's veneer of normalcy masked a deeper unrest sent chills through me as we sifted through old letters, faded photographs, and forgotten diaries. The echoes of those hidden meetings grew louder, whispering of debts unpaid, promises broken, and threats made in the dark, all converging on that summer night and the innocence it had stolen. Every step forward felt like treading on fragile ice, knowing that revealing the truth might shatter the fragile peace that had settled over the town, but also desperate for the light that could finally free Mia from the silence that had held her captive for so long. I thought about Mia's smile, so bright and full of life just before she vanished, and I refused to believe that she had been lost to random chance, that some dangerous secret had pulled her into the darkness and kept her there. With every discovery, my resolve hardened, fueled by the knowledge that the truth, no matter how painful, was the only path to justice and healing. And though fear tried to claw at my heart, the fire within me burned hotter, lighting the way through the secrets beneath the surface and toward the answers Mia deserved. The day the old family friend walked through the door, I felt a mix of dread and desperate hope swirling inside me, knowing that after all these years, any new revelation could either bring us closer to Mia or plunge us further into darkness. His eyes were tired, weighed down by secrets that had gnawed at his conscience for decades. And as he settled into the chair opposite me and Detective Hayes, his voice trembled with the burden of the truth. He was about to unveil a confession, so shocking it fractured the fragile trust I had clung to in the people around me, and turned the entire investigation on its head. He spoke of hushed conversations held behind closed doors, of threats made to keep silent, and of a shadowy cover-up that stretched into the hearts of families we had once called friends. including some who had been at the party that night, painting a grim picture of complicity and betrayal that sent waves of disbelief crashing through me. The evidence he provided, letters, photographs, and whispered names, pointed to a network of lies, carefully constructed to hide what really happened to Mia, to protect those who had something to lose, and to keep a dangerous secret buried beneath years of smiles and polite nods. I remember feeling my world shift beneath my feet, the foundations of the community I trusted crumbling as I realized that the people I had relied on for comfort and support had been guarding truths that might have saved Mia if only they had been spoken aloud. The betrayal cut deeper than any wound, leaving me raw and trembling, but it also ignited a fierce fire within me, a determination to tear through the layers of deception no matter how painful, to demand justice for my daughter and for every family who had suffered in silence. As the confession unfolded, memories I had pushed aside resurfaced: the strange looks, the whispered warnings, the sudden disappearances of those who had been close to the case. And I understood that Mia's disappearance was not an isolated tragedy, but a symptom of a darker, more insidious web woven by fear and greed. Detective Hayes, his expression grim but resolute, assured me that this new direction would breathe life into the cold case, and together we vowed to pursue every lead, to shine a light into the darkest corners of the past and expose the truths that had been buried for far too long. Despite the pain and the fracturing of relationships I once thought unbreakable, I knew that this confession was a turning point, the moment when silence was finally broken and the fight for Mia's justice began anew. Standing on the precipice of this painful revelation, I found strength in the knowledge that uncovering the truth, no matter how bitter, was the only way to honor Mia's memory and to heal the wounds that had long festered in the shadows of our lives. The closer Detective Hayes and I got to unraveling the tangled truth behind Mia's disappearance, the heavier the atmosphere around us grew, like a storm gathering on the horizon, dark and threatening. And soon enough, the warnings began. Cryptic notes slipped under our doors, phone calls with no one on the other end, and shadows lurking just beyond the reach of streetlights, all whispering a chilling message: stop digging or face the consequences. I remember the first time the note appeared, folded and worn, the ink smeared as if someone had tried to erase parts of it, and when I unfolded the paper, the words cut through me like a cold wind, warning me to back off or lose everything I held dear. And though fear gnawed at the edges of my courage, it only deepened my determination to see this through for Mia's sake. Detective Hayes, ever steady, grew more cautious but never wavered, reminding me that truth and justice were worth any risk. And together, we began to work more quietly, meeting in whispered tones and sharing information in coded messages, knowing that the eyes watching us were no longer mere neighbors, but threats lurking close, waiting for any misstep. The stakes felt higher than ever, the lines between friend and foe blurring as those we once trusted seemed to shrink back or vanish altogether, swallowed by fear or perhaps guilt. And the town's veneer of safety cracked, revealing a darker reality beneath. I felt the weight of the threats every time I stepped outside, my heart pounding with the knowledge that someone, somewhere, was willing to go to great lengths to keep the past buried. And yet I refused to let fear silence me, my mother's instinct roaring louder than the warnings, driving me forward into the unknown. Nights became sleepless battles between hope and dread, as I lay awake, imagining the worst but clinging to the belief that Mia deserved to be found, that justice was not just a dream, but a necessity that could no longer be denied. Detective Hayes and I leaned on each other, our bond forged in the crucible of shared risk and unwavering commitment. A partnership born not just of duty, but of a profound human desire to heal a broken family and a fractured community. The threatening shadows lurking in the corners of our lives only made our resolve burn brighter, each warning fueling a fire inside us that refused to be quenched, reminding us that the path to truth was never easy, but always worth walking. I thought often of Mia, her innocent face and bright laughter, and how far we had come despite the dangers. And in those moments, fear was pushed aside by love and the fierce urgency to bring light into the darkness that had swallowed her whole. As we moved forward, careful and deliberate, every step felt like a small victory against the silence that had smothered us for so long, and though the road ahead was uncertain and fraught with peril, I held on to the unwavering conviction that justice for Mia was closer than ever before, waiting just beyond the shadows that tried to stop us. The day I discovered the hidden compartment in that cramped, dust-choked crawlspace beneath Abby's old house is etched into my memory like a burning brand, a moment when hope and despair collided in a whirlwind of raw emotion. And as I brushed aside decades of dirt and broken fragments, my hands trembled as they uncovered a small, concealed box tucked beneath loose floorboards, its presence like a whisper from the past, promising answers I had long sought but feared I would never find. Inside the box were Mia's belongings, her favorite bracelet, a tattered stuffed bear, and a worn-out book she had loved to read, objects so intimately hers that their discovery tore at the walls of my heart, reopening wounds both fresh and old, while simultaneously lighting a fierce, undeniable spark of hope that perhaps this was the key to unraveling the mystery that had haunted our lives for over a decade. Alongside her things, forensic evidence lay preserved against the odds fragments of fabric, traces of hair, and something more elusive, a faint but crucial clue that Detective Hayes quickly recognized as the breakthrough we had desperately needed. The hard proof that could finally guide us through the labyrinth of silence and half-truths that had kept Mia's story locked away. The news of our discovery rippled through the town like a sudden storm, shaking the foundations of a community, long subdued by grief and fear, forcing neighbors to confront the reality they had tried so hard to ignore. And in that moment, the fragile threads of hope began to weave themselves into something stronger, something almost tangible that promised closure and justice at last. I remember standing in the crawl space, clutching Mia's bracelet, the weight of years pressing down on me but tempered by a fierce determination to see this through, to bring my daughter home in truth even if the path was lined with pain. The forensic tests confirmed the evidence was linked unmistakably to Mia, and while the truth it revealed was harsh and shattering, it offered a clarity we had never dared to hope for. A clarity that narrowed the search to a few grim possibilities, but also opened the door to answers we so desperately needed. Detective Hayes and I worked feverishly, piecing together timelines and retracing steps, knowing that every detail mattered and that the discovery in that crawl space had shifted the tide in our favor. The town's pulse quickened as whispers turned to conversations, and while fear still lingered, it was now mixed with the electric charge of possibility, the collective breath held in anticipation of what the truth would finally reveal. In the quiet moments after the discovery, I allowed myself to imagine a future where Mia's name would no longer be spoken in sorrow but in remembrance, where the pain of loss might be tempered by the balm of justice and healing, and where our fractured lives might begin to mend. That hidden compartment beneath the floorboards was more than a secret. It was a testament to a mother's relentless love and the unyielding pursuit of truth. A beacon that shone through the darkness and promised that no matter how deep the shadows, light could still find a way in. The moment came suddenly, unexpectedly charged with a tension that made my heart hammer so loudly I thought it would burst. As Ryan and I stood face to face with the person who had haunted my nightmares for so long. The one who held the key to Mia's disappearance, and the air between us crackled with emotions so raw and heavy that words felt both impossible and urgent. A swirling storm of jealousy, fear, and betrayal that spilled over in every glance and trembling breath. This confrontation was not just a meeting, but a reckoning, peeling back years of carefully woven lies and half-truths, exposing the bitter undercurrents that had poisoned the fabric of our community and shattered my family's world. I watched as the person before me struggled under the weight of guilt and fear, their eyes flickering with a mix of defiance and desperation, revealing the fractured humanity behind the mask they had worn for so long. And I felt a sharp pang of sorrow mixed with my anger, knowing that beneath the cruelty and silence was someone broken, trapped by their own choices and haunted by consequences. Ryan's steady presence at my side was a lifeline, grounding me when the flood of emotions threatened to overwhelm, and together we navigated the treacherous terrain of confession and denial, piecing together the story that had remained hidden in the shadows for too long. The person's voice cracked as they finally admitted to actions fueled by jealousy and fear. Fears of losing control, of secrets being revealed, and of lives unraveling under the pressure of hidden truths, and the betrayal that had stemmed from that fear spilled out in a torrent of confessions that brought the darkness of that night into the harsh light of day. I felt the sharp sting of every revelation, like cold water poured over wounds I had thought were healing, but even in that pain, a strange relief washed over me. The burden of uncertainty lifting as the full picture emerged from the fog of mystery and silence. The confrontation was a raw and painful reminder that the path to truth is seldom clean or easy, tangled instead with human flaws and frailties that make justice complicated and healing a slow, uncertain journey. Yet beneath the anguish, I found a fierce resolve. This moment marked not the end, but the beginning of the long road toward redemption, accountability, and perhaps one day, peace. As the confession spilled forth, I thought of Mia, her laughter, her bright eyes, the dreams stolen from her, and vowed silently that no matter how dark the road, I would walk it to the end to honor her memory and bring light to the shadows that had swallowed her whole. In the silence that followed the storm of emotions, Ryan and I exchanged a glance filled with shared determination, knowing that while facing the darkness was terrifying, it was also necessary to reclaim the future from the pain of the past and to finally begin the healing that Mia and all of us deserved. The courtroom was a place of sharp contrasts, cold, sterile walls filled with the heavy weight of years of grief, anger, and desperate hope, where I stood day after day fighting with everything I had to honor Mia's memory and demand the justice that had long eluded us. And as the town watched from the edges of their lives, whispers and gasps rippling through the community like waves crashing on a shore, I felt the full force of every eye, every silent judgment, every flicker of sympathy that passed over faces both familiar and distant. The trial was more than a legal battle. It was a reckoning, a moment when all the buried secrets and painful truths spilled into the harsh light of the courtroom, exposing wounds raw and deep that the town had tried so hard to hide beneath polite smiles and whispered denials. And each testimony, each piece of evidence, laid bare the fragile threads of trust that bound us, and revealed how easily they had been torn apart by fear, betrayal, and silence. I listened as witnesses spoke hesitantly, their voices trembling with the weight of memory and guilt, while others stood firm, their words cutting through the tension with painful clarity. And with every revelation, I could see the faces of families and friends shift from disbelief to sorrow, from confusion to quiet acceptance as they grappled with the reality that Mia's disappearance was entwined with dark truths none of us had wanted to face. My own heart raced with a mixture of fear and determination, knowing that this trial was my daughter's final chance to speak, to tell the story she never could, and to hold those responsible accountable, no matter how difficult or bitter the path. As I sat through long days of legal arguments and cross-examinations, the memories of Mia, her laughter, her dreams, her innocence stolen fueled the fire within me, a fierce love that refused to be silenced by fear or time, and I vowed that I would not rest until the truth was spoken aloud, reverberating through the halls of justice and into the hearts of everyone who had ever cared for her. The judge's stern gaze and the jury's measured expressions reminded me that this was a place where pain met consequence, where the fractured pieces of a broken past were put on display to be examined, judged, and, hopefully, mended through the slow work of truth and accountability. As the verdict neared, a hush fell over the courtroom, the air thick with anticipation and dread, and I held my breath, clinging to the hope that justice would finally be served, that Mia's name would be spoken not just in sorrow, but in honor, and that the shadow that had darkened our lives might begin to lift. When the gavel finally fell, signaling the end of the trial, a wave of emotions crashed over me: relief, grief, exhaustion, and a quiet sense of closure, knowing that while the scars would never fully fade, the fight for justice had given my daughter a voice and my family a chance to heal, even as the community around us began to reckon with the truths uncovered and the promise of a future shaped by courage and resilience. After the verdict was delivered, a strange mixture of relief and exhaustion settled over me, like waking from a long, dark nightmare into a morning both fragile and bright. And though the pain of losing Mia would never fully fade, I felt the first stirrings of something I had thought impossible: hope for healing, and a future where her memory could be a source of strength rather than only sorrow. In the weeks that followed, I began reaching out to family members I had drifted apart from in the chaos of grief, slowly knitting together bonds worn thin by years of pain and silence. And while the wounds were still fresh, there was comfort in the tentative reconnection, in shared tears and memories that reminded me I was not alone in carrying the weight of loss. The community, too, seemed to shift around me. Neighbors who had once kept their distance now offering quiet support and solidarity, as if the truth we had uncovered had broken a spell of fear and suspicion that had kept us isolated. And together we began to envision a path forward, one where no other family would have to endure the agonizing uncertainty that had defined my own. I threw myself into advocacy, determined that Mia's disappearance would not be forgotten, that the systems meant to protect children would be strengthened, and that the stories of those lost would fuel change rather than be swallowed by silence, becoming a voice for those still searching and a shield for those vulnerable. Rebuilding my life was neither quick nor easy. It was a slow, careful process of reclaiming pieces of myself that had been shattered, learning to find joy in small moments again, and allowing grief to coexist with hope rather than consume it completely, like a delicate balancing act on a narrow ledge where every step was both a risk and a triumph. I found strength in the simple acts of living. Watching the sunrise, feeling the warmth of a friend's hand, hearing children's laughter in the park. And these moments became my refuge and my reminder that life, even after tragedy, could still hold beauty and meaning. There were days when the shadows returned, when memories of Mia flooded my mind and brought tears that would not be held back. But I learned to welcome those waves of grief as part of the journey rather than obstacles to overcome, knowing that healing is not linear, and that love does not end with loss. Through it all, the determination to honor Mia's memory by protecting others remained the beacon guiding me forward, and I found solace in the growing community of families and advocates who shared this mission, their resilience and courage inspiring me to keep fighting. In the quiet moments when I paused to reflect on how far I had come, I recognized that the road ahead would always hold challenges and heartache, but it would also be paved with hope, connection, and the promise that no child's disappearance would ever be forgotten or ignored again. Mia's story, once a source of unbearable pain, had become a catalyst for change, and in embracing that purpose, I found a measure of peace and strength that I never thought possible, lighting the way for myself and for others who walk the long road to healing after loss. Years later, as I stand quietly in the stillness of the old house, the memory of that cramped crawl space beneath the floorboards comes flooding back, not as a place of shadows and secrets, but as a symbol of the journey we have traveled from despair to hope. A dark passage that once held the weight of silence and sorrow, now shining with the light of truth uncovered, and the relentless love that refused to let Mia's story fade into the night. I think about the long nights spent aching for answers, the countless moments when I felt lost in the overwhelming darkness of grief and uncertainty, and yet through it all, the flame of a mother's love burned fierce and steady, guiding me through the maze of pain and doubt toward a place where justice was no longer a distant dream, but a living, breathing reality. That tiny, hidden space beneath the house, once nothing more than a forgotten corner filled with dust and forgotten relics, became the gateway to the truth that had eluded us for so long. The silent witness to a story that had been buried but never erased, and as I run my fingers over the rough wood of the floorboards above, I am reminded of the strength it took to face the darkness and the courage that lies in holding on when all hope seems lost. The scars of the past remain etched deep in my heart, memories that will never fully fade. But they no longer define me or my family. They are part of the tapestry of resilience and healing we have woven together, a testament to the power of truth and the unbreakable bonds forged in love and loss. In the quiet moments, when the house is filled only with the soft creak of settling wood and the gentle whisper of wind through the trees, I feel Mia's presence. Not as a ghost or a shadow, but as a light that guides me forward, a reminder that even in the darkest places, there is always hope waiting to be found. The community around us has changed, too, shaped by the journey we have shared and the lessons learned from tragedy, and while the pain of what happened will never fully disappear, there is a new understanding, a collective commitment to protect, to remember, and to ensure that no child is lost to silence again. I have found peace in knowing that my fight was not in vain, that the love that drove me through those harrowing years has brought us to this place of truth and justice, where Mia's memory lives on as a beacon for all who seek light in the darkness. And as I look toward the future, I carry with me the quiet strength born from a mother's unwavering devotion, the courage to face whatever lies ahead, and the hope that through our story, others will find the power to keep searching, keep fighting, and keep loving, no matter how long the journey or how deep the shadows may seem.